It was a fine summer day in July 1518 in the beautiful city of Strasbourg in Alsace, part of modern-day France. Our mysterious story began with a woman named Trophia. As the tale goes, at one point, out of the blue, she went out into the street and began to dance. The problem was, it didn't seem like she enjoyed dancing. She didn't even have any music playing in the background. It looked more like a series of uncontrolled twists and turns. So, what made this woman behave in such a strange way? More so, why did so many people follow in her footsteps in the following days and weeks? That small group of people that initially gathered around Trophia kept on dancing outdoors despite the scorching heat. They moved their arms wildly and swayed their bodies even as their clothes began to get drenched with sweat. They danced through the night and into the next day. Despite their exhaustion, hunger, thirst, and pain in their feet, they continued to dance for days without stopping. As time passed, more and more people joined in the dance. At one point, it was estimated that hundreds of people were participating, all moving in the same frenzied manner. Now, just so we're clear, this was not a typical club rave we're used to these days. People looked like they were moving without their consent. The dancing continued even as some of the people started collapsing in front of the horrified onlookers. Authorities had to step in at one point, surely, but they couldn't explain why this bizarre dancing phenomenon occurred in the first place. To this day, we've yet to discover the nature of this mysterious event, which lasted about 3 months in total. We can't look at the facts, though. For starters, even the local physicians back then didn't really have any idea what was going on. Most of them were stumped and could only explain it as the result of a thing they called hot blood. They thought it was somewhat similar to a fever. Ooh, could this have been the ancestor of disco fever? Hardly. These days, with all the available technology and information, it doesn't make any sense at all. Fever alone doesn't make people dance. Physicians and local authorities thought that the best and only way to cure this behavior was for the individuals to dance until this fever, this urge, simply disappeared. Locals even set up a stage and brought professional dancers along with a band to provide music. The strange episode finally ended in September when the dancers were taken to a mountaintop in hopes they could request help from some sort of higher spirits that could end their misery. Weirdly enough, similar events took place in Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands, even before this event, but none were as large or as serious as the one in 1518. Years after the incident, Paracelsus, a physician, wrote a series of books on this dancing condition after the incident in Strasbourg. He was pretty famous for his work on using chemistry in medicine. He believed that this behavior was not caused by bad luck or unnatural forces, but instead by something in people's bodies that gave them a ticklish feeling. This is what affected their judgment and caused the movements. He basically said that the people had an extreme case of tickles. Some scientists have claimed over the years that the dancing frenzy was caused by some sort of food people may have eaten, which could have made them sick. Some of them have even suggested that the culprit might have been a fungus called ergot. This fungus grows on grains used for baking bread and has a chemical that can seriously affect people's judgment. Others don't believe this to be possible because people can't dance for days just because of their exposure to the fungus. Also, not everyone would have reacted the same way. The outbreaks of uncontrollable dancing happened in areas with different climates and crops, too. It's highly unlikely that this fungus would have been present in all these locations. Another theory was suggested by John Waller, an American medical historian, who thought the dancing phenomenon of 1518 was caused by something much simpler, people being very stressed out. He pointed out that these types of behavior could happen when people were under a lot of pressure. As a result, they start to believe in scary things and behave in unusual ways. If we look at the information we have from back in the day, in all fairness, people in Strasbourg had a lot to worry about. If the weather was bad, their crops were affected, so food was often scarce. Waller also suggested that people were pretty superstitious too. The locals in Strasbourg believed that if they didn't make a certain higher spirit happy, they would be forced to dance to pay for their disobedience. Perhaps we'll never know the true reason why people suddenly started dancing that day under the hot summer sun. It doesn't mean the story hasn't influenced literature. Uncontrollable dancing had a captivating effect on those who saw it. This idea is also shown in the famous fairy tale called The Red Shoes, written by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen. The story mentions a special pair of red shoes that forced the wearer to dance until they simply couldn't handle it anymore. Sure, this story had another meaning altogether, to warn against vanity. But it also suggests that dancing may become problematic if done excessively. Should you ever find yourself on a dance floor filled with energetic people, it might be hard to stand still. You'll feel inclined to at least bounce from one foot to another from peer pressure, if not because of the music. Now, let's not forget, though, dancing can mean so much more. Music and dances are important parts of everyday life in many cultures around the world. And there is no other place on earth where dancing is more valued than in Africa. In these cultures, dances tell stories and are not just for fun. They talk about history, show emotions, and help bring people together. A lot of African tribes are famous for their dances, like the Maasai tribe of Tanzania and Kenya and the Zulu tribe of South Africa. In most African villages, everyone dances to the beat of drums, and the whole community joins in by singing and playing along. What's special about African culture is its polycentric dance. That means that different parts of a dancer's body move to different beats in the music. This makes it unique but complicated to learn and can take a long time to master. Even though different groups of people in Africa do this type of dance, there are still many differences between them. Another special type of dance takes us to a different continent altogether. It's called the haka, and it is a traditional Maori dance from New Zealand. It's performed by men, women, and children as a form of expression, challenge, or celebration. It can be accompanied by chanting and shouting, and it can be performed standing still or moving forward. Locals often perform it at significant events, such as weddings. It's known as a way to show strength, bravery, and unity, and can be used to intimidate opponents. It's so important to locals that it's become a pre-game ritual for the New Zealand national rugby team, the All Blacks. Not to mention, it's even protected by law. Asian traditions have special types of movements too. Kabuki, for instance, is a type of Japanese theater that includes both dancing and acting. It started in Kyoto in the 1600s, and these days it features only male actors. They play various characters in funny shows with naughty jokes. Over time, Kabuki became a 5-part performance that could be about Japanese history, family drama, or dance. The actors use special movements and faces painted with white powder and bright colors to show their emotions. The theater also has special effects, like hidden doors and a spinning stage, to make the show more exciting and keep the audience entertained for a whole day.
This is Alex. He's a regular, normal guy, working a 9-to-5 job. He doesn't make an impressive 6 figures a year, and he could only afford a used Honda, even though he's always been dreaming about something more extravagant. And this is Henry, but it's more correct to pronounce his name as Henri, since he's French. You might have noticed from his clothes that he's 1. Old-fashioned, and 2. Quite rich. Yep, you're looking at Henry II of France, a medieval monarch straight from the 16th century who could afford anything he wanted back then. And he's not old-fashioned. He actually looks pretty edgy for his time. Sure, Alex and Henry never met, and will never meet each other. After all, they're from different time periods, and their statuses are pretty different too. But what if I tell you that Alex leads a way more luxurious life than Henry II of France? This one may not sound too convincing, but any of you who's watching this video leads a more luxurious life than a medieval king. Let's dive in. Royal carriages seem romantic and all, but no matter how advanced a carriage was in medieval times, it will never be a decent rival even for the rustiest and most decaying car of today. I'm not speaking about AC, car audio systems, and other fancy features. It's more about the quality of the roads and the overall comfort. Modern suspension works wonders, and even though there's evidence many carriages back then did have suspension systems, they still can't be compared to what we have today. Next on the list is pretty obvious: medicine. Yeah, insurance today costs a pretty penny, and sometimes it's cheaper to extract a tooth than to cure it. But at least you won't be treated with the help of herbal cures. These can be good indeed, though sometimes we need something more advanced. I mean, a headache is more likely to go away with the help of a pill we have in our emergency kits at home than with the help of sweet-smelling herbs. In medieval times, curers used rose, lavender, sage, and hay to help someone with headaches. And should something more serious happen to anyone today, they'll see someone with an actual degree, not a magician. Yeah, that was pretty common in medieval times. Okay, enough about the sad things. Plus, something cool's going on right now. Alex has recently met a girl on a dating app, and it's their first date today. Henry II of France would have been terribly jealous if he had known such a thing was possible. He got married at the age of 14, and his wife was from the prosperous family of Medici. Henry couldn't simply choose any peasant girl he liked. Royalty was supposed to get married wisely, taking into account all the financial and political advantages. Seems like in terms of love, Alex from the 21st century wins. But in terms of wealth, there's no doubt it's Henry. Have you ever heard of the term usury? It's something totally normal today, but quite prohibited in the Middle Ages. Basically, usury is when someone makes money from money, aka charging interest. Usury was banned due to religious issues in many medieval places, but still, you couldn't just go get a loan from a bank. But as always, some people did find a way out, so loans technically existed. The easiest way was to issue a binding bond for, let's say, $20, while the borrower would only get $15. Voila! There's no interest mentioned on papers, but still, the borrower got the money and the loaner got their interest. So Alex would have trouble with his credit card back in medieval times. And Henry wouldn't need such a thing as a credit card. He's full of his own funds. Alright, and what about other money things? Today, we can send and receive money instantly to and from anyone. Thank you, almighty internet. But in the Middle Ages, things were pretty complicated. So a young prince couldn't text his father king, so he sent him a bit of money to cover that tavern bill. The first almost fast money transfers appeared in 1851, thanks to the invention of the telegraph and Western Union. As for taverns and food in general, trust me, the paintings showing incredible feasts sometimes exaggerate. Before Photoshop and other editing programs appeared, those were the artists themselves who retouched the painting. I mean, everyone wants to look good, even food. Going back to meals, if you fancy spices, you know it's not a big deal to find them in the closest convenience store, and they don't cost much. But back in the medieval times, they were so expensive and hard to transport that only the noblest people could afford them. Sure, kings did have access to all of them, but if they saw today's spices section in the supermarket, they'd think it's sorcery. By the way, there was even a special department at the royal court called the spicery, and it's not hard to guess that it was entirely devoted to spices. As for the main course, medieval kings would typically eat wild game, and they didn't have much of a choice. Now let's peek at a typical king's menu. First off, on the king's table, there was a stuffed chicken, a quarter of stag, and a loin of veal that was generously covered in sauce. Next, a huge meat pie adorned with smaller pies. All of that would form a crown. And for dessert, there were some jelly, cream, cheese, and strawberries stewed in rose water. That probably sounds fancy, but remember that even so, there wasn't much choice. The food highly depended on the region where the king lived. Plus, he couldn't just pick up the phone and order sushi delivery. Hey, what do you do? Anyways, No matter what we do, in most cases, modern people are often free to choose their profession. At least, we can technically do that, but a medieval king didn't have such an option. He had his royal duties. New laws? Yep, the king probably didn't have to create them himself, but he needed to approve of new ideas and implement them. Protecting the kingdom from enemies? Absolutely. And I guess that must have been tiring. I mean, even Alex is quite burnt out with his 9-to-5 job, but at least he doesn't need to plan any protection strategies, and it's not that millions of people in the kingdom depend on him. And don't forget that the king is the person who would have negotiations with foreign ambassadors, settle down new relationships, and sometimes even stop those relationships. Sounds like a lot of responsibilities. But even if all these points didn't convince you that you're way more luxurious than a medieval king, and you still want to be one, these are some pieces of advice for you on how to be a good king, just in case scientists finally invent a time machine. Number 1. Be dominant. A real king should know how to show strength and power. Nobody cares what personality you have. You need to show how potent you are. Or at least fake it. Number 2. Be protective. There are a bunch of people in your kingdom looking for your help. They probably want to have an audience with you. And you gotta be caring, helpful, and generous. Generosity is a trait of a real king. At some point, it will probably seem to you that you're a kind of therapist, but having audiences is a royal duty. Number 3. Be wise while choosing people around you. Royal duties are hard, and one can hardly carry them out all on their own. So you'll need people to delegate your duties to. Like, you can't control that all the taxes were collected and all the disputes are fairly resolved. But beware, not all trustworthy agents are that trustworthy. Some of them may even want to poison you, like King John, who was rumored to have been poisoned by a monk, even though the official records claim he passed away because of gluttony. The official version seems plausible. After all, you know a medieval king menu. So, Alex, you still want to be a king? We people used to have real superpowers, but they all disappeared long ago because these abilities became useless and evolution took them away. For example, one of these superpowers was hibernation sleep. Yeah, it doesn't sound as cool as teleportation or flying, but in the modern world, it would be helpful. Imagine that you go to bed before winter and wake up in the spring. No cold weather, no spending money on food at this time, just a long, deep sleep. So perhaps our ancient hominin ancestors, more like primates than humans, could fall into a long hibernation. It was about 500,000 years ago, hundreds of thousands of years before the appearance of the first Homo sapiens. Hominini of that time lived in caves during the Ice Age and fell into a long sleep to survive. However, this is not a confirmed fact, but scientists have some guesses about it. Paleontologists discovered many fossils of our ancestors in one Spanish cave. The analysis showed that hominini lacked vitamin D and fat reserves. These strange indicators showed that the inhabitants of these caves could be in a state of hibernation. Perhaps their metabolic processes slowed down and their fat and vitamin reserves were depleted to support life during a long sleep. Of course, such an ability could be useful in the modern world, but it has several disadvantages. Let's look at the example of bears and what problems they can face during hibernation. Unique metabolic processes support their long sleep, but if these processes are violated, then after waking up, the bear can get very sick. This may happen because of an insufficient amount of fat and food reserves. Another ability from the past would help save thousands of dollars for modern people. This ability is strong and healthy teeth. Today, we have dental clinics, high-tech equipment, hundreds of types of toothbrushes and toothpaste, mouthwashes, and much more for the health of our teeth. Despite this, ancient people had stronger and healthier teeth. more powerful jaws and sharp teeth allowed them to chew on hard meat, and the immunity of the oral cavity didn't allow bacteria to develop. But then, agriculture appeared. People started to eat grains. This added new species of bacteria to the oral cavity, weakened the jaw muscles, and provoked cavities. Teeth became more fragile, but they got the most severe blow when people discovered sugar. Sweets added a lot of problems to teeth health. Previously, teeth worked as a tool for processing hard materials, but then we began to eat soft food, meatballs, and fried chicken, and the strength of teeth became meaningless. Evolution took that away from us. Our ancestors were taller, stronger, more agile, and more resilient than we are. A couple of days spent in the fields while hunting mammoths were the equivalent of a month of regular training in the gym. People were not obese. They ate natural food and looked like athletes. But why were they taller? What influenced bone growth? Over the past 10,000 years, the changes in growth were most noticeable. But this trend has changed in our direction in the last few centuries. People have started to get taller. It's difficult to determine the exact cause of such changes. It can be genetics, environment, lifestyle, nutrition, or modern technologies. So, 40,000 years ago, Cro-Magnons hunted and gathered in Europe. They were better developed physically, thanks to this lifestyle. Their ancestors migrated to Europe from Africa, which was the reason for the tall growth. Longer bones were helpful for adaptation to the hot African climate, but after 30,000 years, the growth of people sharply decreased because of the onset of cold weather and the development of agriculture. Our ancestors went through times of famine, and their bodies shrank over time to adapt to a meager diet. In addition, living next to livestock provoked the emergence of new diseases. All of it affected the appearance of ancient people. There are almost no such problems now. You can eat healthy food, receive medical care, and take vitamins. All this allowed us to grow a few inches taller. But one change in the human body still remains a mystery. We have the most advanced civilization in history today. People become professionals in neuroscience and thermonuclear physics, create powerful computers, have access to all the knowledge in the world, and study the boundless depths of space. But for some reason, our brains have become much smaller than those of people who lived several thousand years ago. But how is this possible, given that people were engaged in agriculture, trade, and the manufacture of simple tools in the distant past? Then big cities, architecture, art, and technology began to appear. And all this time, our brain was shrinking while humanity was moving forward. It lost a piece equal to 4 ping pong balls. The reason is not that people were more intelligent in the past. The volume of the brain is not related to intellectual level. It's possible that people's brains have shrunk because of collectivity. To understand what that means, let's take a look at ants. Scientists measured the brain size of some species. They saw that species participating in complex social systems had smaller brains. This means that if an ant interacts closely with other ants, sharing work with them, its brain decreases. Sharing duties with other species contributes to brain shrinkage. Its cognitive abilities are distributed among different groups performing different jobs. It seems like a brain unloads its working and thus becomes smaller. That is, if you live alone on an island, do agriculture, fish, and build a house alone, then your brain becomes bigger. But in a large society, where all these activities are distributed among many locals, the human brain is shrinking. In a sense, intelligence becomes collective. And at what point in time did human intelligence become as collective as possible? When writing appeared. It appeared about 2,000 years before the beginning of brain shrinkage. When people learned to write, they freed up a large memory area in the brain. They didn't have to keep all the necessary things and ideas in their minds. With the development of civilization, the collectivization of humankind grew. And then there was TV and the internet. We will discover how this affects our brains in the future. On the one hand, the volume may decrease even more, but on the other hand, we're surrounded by an endless stream of information. We don't know yet how it will affect the size of the brain. The collectivization of consciousness is only one of the hypotheses according to which our brain has increased. Another theory says that this happened because of the home lifestyle. The brain of a dog, cat, or other pet is smaller than their ancestors who lived in the wild without a human. When people started living in cities and spending less energy on getting food, their brains could also begin to shrink. In addition to the size of the brain, people have undergone many changes. Humanity now shows a huge variety in appearance, which the early Homo sapiens didn't have. In the distant past, they possessed the same physical properties characteristic of a particular region. For example, a short and stocky build was typical for people living in cold conditions. The body area of a small person helps to keep warm better. Also, the body area of a tall person gives off heat more efficiently, so people in warm African regions are taller. And in places where it's scorching during the day and frosts come at night, people can develop the ability to lower their body temperature without feeling cold and shivering. This phenomenon concerns the Australian native tribes living in the central desert. The environment affects external characteristics almost as well as genetics. And over the past 40,000 years, the speed of evolution has increased. The ability to travel and the growth of the people population contributed to the mixing of different ethnic groups across the planet, which also provided diversity in evolution. It seems like humanity still comes to the highest point of our evolution, and perhaps there are no limits to that.
You're an adventurer looking for a golden hourglass hidden in the jungle of an exotic country. Finally, you find the artifact. Someone starts shouting as soon as you grab it. "Stop! This is the police! Hands up!" You look around and see two officers. You turn the hourglass over and fall into a suddenly formed portal that takes you through space and time. "Hey you, stranger, don't move! What are you doing in our temple?" You look around and see two guys with swords. They're the police of ancient Babylon. The vast kingdom in Mesopotamia was the first in history to invent a list of laws and punishments for their violation. The list of these laws was called the Code of Hammurabi and contained 282 laws. They were carved on stone pillars around the 10th century BCE. The laws had rules about the family and behavior in society, and generally were similar to the laws of modern civilizations. The authorities of Babylon created special police squads consisting of locals. Their goal was to monitor public order and ensure no one broke the law. Some records of the squad's work have survived to this day. They talk about how the ancient police stopped noisy feasts, monitored tax payments, and searched for thieves and looters. In general, their routine was similar to the routine of modern police. They guarded temples and made sure that nothing was taken from them. You're now in their temple, holding the golden hourglass. The sand pours down, and you teleport to another place. It's the 14th century. You're in Nigeria, on a hot plain under the scorching sun. You hear someone approaching you from behind. "Stop! Don't move! Your fate will be decided at the meeting." Two Okonko guards, members of the Igbo ethnic group, walk to you holding spears. Okonko consisted of rich and poor people, young and old. They were the judges of justice and ensured that no one violated the laws. Each village had its own Okonko squad. They severely punished those who cheated or harmed other people. Okonko also solved land disputes. Before passing a verdict or sentence, Okonko discussed it at public meetings. You haven't broken their law, but you're a stranger in their village, so they want to grab you. Fortunately, the hourglass transports you out of there. Now you're inside a temple in ancient Egypt. You hear barking dogs, screaming monkeys, and human voices. Who are you? You turn around and see the Magi, the police of the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. These experienced guys with swords patrol the streets with dogs and even monkeys. They were residents of the neighboring kingdom of Nubia. Still, as the territory of Egypt expanded, they offered their services as the guardians of order. During the New Kingdom, the temple priests of Egypt performed police functions. They protected temples and caught looters and thieves. If someone stole something from a temple, temple priests arrested the thief and conducted their own investigation. They won't investigate anything this time as you disappear and continue your journey. You're in a hot jungle now. You can see large stone buildings through bushes and trees and hear a flowing river and people's voices. You're next to a large agricultural area. It looks like a modern civilization in a tropical forest. But this is the 15th century, and you're in the Incan Empire on the South American coast. Police officers are called tokrikokes here, which means the one who sees everything. Two tokrikokes pass by you and don't tell you anything. The Incan Empire had a developed legal system, and no one could arrest you just like that. The one who accused another person of violating the law had to be above the rank of the accused. Therefore, tokrikokes were the most senior people in cities. They kept order and also conducted a population census. Their duties also included the distribution of land and the construction of roads and bridges. They held all court proceedings publicly and punished those who committed serious violations. But for petty hooliganism, people were just subjected to public censure. Here, you feel safe thanks to the harsh but fair laws. But the hourglass is restless and takes you to ancient Greece. And to be honest, you're out of luck because the Cryptia of Sparta is in charge here. These tough guys got trained in duels from an early age and developed incredible strength and endurance. Yeah, everything is as we've seen it in the movies. The Cryptia means hidden. This police force always acted cautiously and quietly to deliver a crushing blow. They didn't have armors or big swords. They were wearing light clothes and had sharp knives. The Cryptia kept order and made sure farmers paid taxes and shared their harvest. Also, the Cryptia suppressed any rebellions among people. Unlike the people in other countries, the Cryptia worked at night and rested during the day. Well, it's daytime, so no one will arrest you. But if it were night, you would hardly be able to escape from the Spartan police. You teleport to ancient Judea, where a fair judicial system was highly valued. Each city had its judge and 2 trained soldiers under their command. They were called Judean shotarim. These fighters were excellent at archery and sword fights. Their duties included checking and setting market prices and resolving private property and public safety issues. Dogs in every house should be chained, there should be no pits on the street, and the sale of knives and swords should be strictly regulated. Any violation of the law was investigated and dealt with in court. The locals really appreciated this order and paid for it as taxpayers. Now the Golden Hourglass takes you to 15th century West Africa. You're in the Songhai Empire. This was one of the largest countries in West Africa with first-class police called the Kadi. Serious violations were punished cruelly, so people were afraid to break the law. The Kadi were government officials appointed by the king. They decided who to court-martial and who to punish with a small fine. They monitored not only the order in cities, but also the environment of the king. If someone wanted to commit treason or overthrow the ruler, the Kadi found out about it and neutralized the threat. Now you find yourself in a very hot place, but not because the sun is scorching, but because there are flames everywhere. The building you're in is on fire and you don't know what to do. At that moment, 2 guys run inside and pull you out. They just saved your life. Meet the Vigiles, the police of the Roman Empire. More precisely, they were firefighters. In 21 BCE, the Roman emperor ordered his subjects to extinguish fires in the homes of the nobility and ordinary poor people. For this, the emperor received praise and decided to create the first public fire service in Rome. The Vigiles patrolled the streets and extinguished fires caused by hot weather or hooligans. Soon, the Wigilis began to keep order and catch robbers. They wore light armor and had whips and staffs. You don't have time to thank them for saving your life because the hourglass takes you to another era. The Mauryan Empire, which lasted from 321 to 185 BCE, was the first empire of ancient India. You don't have time to do anything as two big guys grab you and blindfold you with a rag. They're taking you to interrogation. Every city in this state had a police chief and his team called Gops. They did all the police work and spied for the emperor. They looked for other spies, registered new visitors, and followed them. They patrolled the streets, kept order, and knew everything happening in the cities. They're going to put you in a cage, but you disappear right from their hands. You finally return to the 21st century. There's no more sand in the top part of the hourglass. So you ponder committing a small robbery to see how modern-day police will respond. But then the hourglass reappears and drops you into prison so you can get a close-up view. Then you wake up. A comfortable abode with a gorgeous view of the Mediterranean Sea will serve as a perfect rain shelter. Well, this is what a real estate advertisement might have looked like for Neanderthals 100,000 years ago. Welcome to the weird and wonderful caves you could live in, or not. Of course, back then, neither real estate and advertising had been invented yet. Never mind the fact that Neanderthals couldn't build houses and often lived in caves. Yet, one of those caves looks an awful lot like a residential building. It's situated inside a high limestone cape called the Rock of Gibraltar. If the Neanderthals had had an economy, the caves inside this rock would have cost a bundle. Navigators discovered it in 1907. They just spotted a big hole inside the fortified rock. For many years, scientists have studied this place and found some traces of Neanderthals. They discovered ancient tools in the cave and bones of old animals. But the coolest thing was, they found 4 caves inside the rock. It was like a residential complex. Neanderthals lived alongside neighbors and helped each other hunt and fish. They created feather decorations and painted abstract drawings on the walls. Imagine our ancient predecessors hanging out in these caves 100,000 years ago. And now, scientists hang out there and study the primeval past of Neanderthals in detail. At the end of 2021, archaeologists uncovered a gap inside one of the caves leading to an unknown tunnel. They crawled through this hole and opened a new space under the cave roof. This place has been closed off from the outside world for over 40,000 years. And it seems it was one of the most prestigious apartments in the entire mountain complex. It has high ceilings with ancient stalactites. The ruined stone curtains divided the apartment into several rooms. Scientists also found the remains of ancient animals and scratches on the walls. It seems that Neanderthals had never lived here, but they used to visit this place. Archaeologists found the shell of a sea snail called dog whelk. One of the Neanderthals brought it here for some reason, but the primary owners of this place were hyenas. These caves show that Neanderthals were closer to humans than to monkeys. They had a way of life and even some customs. There's still a lot of work ahead, and scientists hope to find new rooms inside this rock. Meanwhile, in 2003, archaeologists discovered another early dwelling on the Isle of Flores in Indonesia. Among the green jungle, they found a cave with ancient tools. At first, everyone thought the human ancestors lived here, but then scientists discovered an unusual skeleton of an adult. A thorough analysis showed the skeleton belonged to a 30-year-old woman, 3.5 feet tall, just above the waist of an average adult. The woman's weight was equal to the weight of an adult shepherd. The skeleton didn't belong to Neanderthals or Australopithecines. It was a new unknown species, which scientists called Homo floresiensis, or simply the Hobbit. Also, there were remains of unusual ancient animals in the cave. It was an elephant the size of a cow, some large storks, and giant rats. Archaeologists have found out that hobbits were not the owners of this place. The main inhabitants were the rats the size of a cat. Maybe they were fighting the hobbits. Some analysis shows that Homo floresiensis wasn't our direct ancestor. They were in a separate branch of evolution. The hobbit skeleton looks more like that of a monkey than of modern humans. In 2009, in the dense jungle of Vietnam, Archaeologists discovered Sandan, the largest cave in the world. If you go inside the cave and shout, you'll hear your echo a long time. In some places, the height of this cave reaches half the height of the Empire State Building, and the total area is larger than one central block of New York. Sandan is one of the 3 caves in the Vietnamese jungle. Many intricate mazes connect these caves. Inside, you can find unique plants and trees that live separately from the outside world. It's a real underground jungle. In some places, you can find collapsed ceilings that let the sunlight in. Besides unusual trees and plants, ancient stalactites hang there. Some limestone deposits are more than 450 million years old. They were here even before dinosaurs appeared. There are also many rivers in the cave. Rainwater coming down from holes in the ceiling has formed them. Fast streams resemble slides in a water park. They lead to unknown underground labyrinths. Scientists have studied only a small part of all these caves. The next unusual cave is in New Zealand. Hundreds of thousands of fireflies live inside. Each of them glows with a blue light. Together, they light up the cave. It may seem to you that you're on another planet, but you can't stay there for a long time. Special air measuring devices are everywhere. Scientists monitor the level of carbon dioxide necessary for the normal existence of fireflies. These insects are sensitive to the environment. If there are many people in the cave, or they stay there too long, the park staff will ask them to leave the place. It's like you're literally stealing oxygen from the fireflies. We've seen some pretty amazing caves so far, but how about a scary one? We're going to the desert of Yemen's Al-Mara province. What we're looking for is not a cave, it's just a black hole in the ground, right in the middle of the desert. It's big, the size of a basketball court. It's not its size that could scare you, but what's inside. Scientists are still not sure what it is. From the depths of this black abyss, a disgusting smell of rotten eggs constantly comes out, and sometimes you can hear some strange, frightening sounds. The blackness of the giant hole in Yemen absorbs all the sun's rays, so you won't see what's there even with a powerful flashlight. People flew over this place by helicopter. They filmed using drones and the most powerful lenses, but they didn't catch anything except darkness. It looks like a big ink spot in the middle of golden sand. The locals are afraid to approach this place. They believe the cave leads to another dimension where evil creatures live. At the moment, the giant hole in Yemen is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious phenomenon of nature. How did it appear? How old is it? Where does it lead? Scientists are trying to find the answers to these questions. There are theories that the hole appeared because of construction work. Geologists drilled the soil nearby in search of minerals. It could have caused fluctuations in the Earth's crust and collapsed the surface. But no one can prove this theory, yet. And now, imagine a place where sunlight has not penetrated for more than 5 million years. There's little oxygen, and it's cold and damp. Still, life is born in this place, not only microbes and bacteria, but also something bigger. The living conditions in this cave are very different from the usual ones, so, in a sense, this cave is like another planet. It's the Movil Cave in the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. The entrance is a small hole in the ground. Inside, a tunnel leads deep below the surface. The levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide are above normal inside the cave. The air here is half as much oxygen as on the surface. People can't be here without an oxygen mask, but other creatures living here can. The cave is home to 48 species of living organisms. 33 of them are unknown. Here you can meet some unusual insects, white snails and white spiders, millipedes with huge whiskers, transparent shrimp, and unique species of leeches. They all live here thanks to the little bacteria autotrophs. They absorb carbon dioxide and release food particles. Bacteria feed on it. Other larger organisms feed on these bacteria, and some bigger organisms eat those little ones. In the end, everyone gets food. In this cave, evolution has created a biological system separate from the rest of the world.
Once upon a time, in a teeny-tiny village up north in England, it was around 11 p.m. on the 13th of April in the year 1699. Little 9-year-old Jane Roth woke up from her first sleep and rubbed her eyes, trying to make sense of the moody evening shadows. Her mom, Mrs. Roth, hopped out of bed and headed straight to the fireplace. Just then, out of nowhere, two dudes popped up by the window and hollered at her to get ready for an adventure. According to Jane's later testimony in court, it seemed like her mom was expecting these mysterious visitors. She willingly went with them, but not before whispering to Jane, "Stay put, kiddo. I'll be back in the morning." Maybe her mom had some secret night mission, or maybe she was in some kind of trouble and knew leaving the house was risky business. Either way, Jane's mom never kept her promise. She never returned home. That night, something awful happened. Mrs. Roth was attacked and passed away. The crime was never solved. Fast forward almost 300 years to the early 1990s. A history enthusiast, Roger Eckerk, strolled into the public record office in London. Among the ancient vellum papers and manuscripts, Eckerk stumbled upon Jane's testimony. But there was something fishy about it that caught his attention. Originally, Eckerk was researching a book about the history of nighttime. He was knee-deep in records spanning from the Middle Ages to the Industrial Revolution. He dreaded writing the sleep chapter, thinking it would be as boring as watching paint dry. I mean, sleep is just a necessary part of life, right? He was skeptical that he'd find anything interesting. But as he dove into Jane's criminal deposition, two words jumped out at him. First sleep. These words held a hint of something tantalizingly peculiar about life in the 17th century that Eckerk had never come across before. Now here's where things get interesting. If there's a first sleep, that means there's got to be a second sleep too? Like splitting the night into two halves? Is this some quirky family thing, or is there more to it? Well, Eckerk went on a wild goose chase through the archives for months, and guess what? He found loads of references to this mysterious double sleeping phenomenon, or as he later dubbed it, biphasic sleep. Alright, let's time travel to see how people caught their Z's. Picture this. It's around 9 to 11 in the evening. If you were lucky enough to afford it, you'd flop onto a mattress stuffed with all sorts of interesting things like straw or rags. Fancy folks might even have feathers in there. But hey, if you were at the bottom of the social ladder, you'd have to make do with heather or even the bare earth floor. Yikes. Most people slept together in one big slumber party. Bedbugs, fleas, lice, family members, friends, servants, you name it. They were all snuggled up together. And if you were traveling, well, you might even find yourself cozying up with a total stranger. Sleeping used to be a whole production, with all these crazy rules and positions. Like, girls would be on one side of the bed with the oldest closest to the wall, followed by the parents, then the boys, and finally any random people who happened to be crashing there. Can you imagine trying to get comfortable with all those restrictions? Anyway, a few hours into the night, people would start waking up naturally. No alarms or anything, just their bodies deciding it was time to be awake. This period was called the Watch, and it was pretty productive. People would do all sorts of things under the dim moonlight and oil lamps. Peasants would use this time to get back to work. They'd check on their animals or do chores around the house. One servant even brewed drinks for her boss in the middle of the night. And of course, you had your troublemakers lurking around causing mischief. After a couple of hours awake, people would go back to bed. This morning sleep could last until dawn or even later. Just like today, when you finally wake up for good depends on when you hit the hay. This biphasic sleep thing was a worldwide phenomenon in the pre-industrial era. It was popular in France and Italy. Eckerk even discovered evidence of this sleep habit in far-flung places like Africa, South and Southeast Asia, Australia, South America, and the Middle East. Back in the medieval era, the rich folks were living it up in their fancy houses with their extravagant beds. These beds were like works of art, adorned with all sorts of decorations and made with the softest feather beds and luxurious linen sheets. They were the centerpiece of any grand house, and the noblemen even had their symbols embroidered on the hangings. Not only were these beds super comfy, but they were also the perfect spot to gather for a chat or entertain guests while showing off their fancy textiles. Now, let's take a look at 14th or 15th century France. You'll see a bed fit for a king, complete with a canopy and curtains. The pillow is covered by a head sheet, which eventually got replaced by pillowcases. Fun fact, back then, a pillowcase was called a pillow bearer. But enough about that, let's get back to the beds. In those days, they didn't have those four-poster beds with poles at each corner like we see in movies. Instead, they had hangings draped from a frame suspended from the ceiling beams. Sometimes there was even a tall bedhead and a fancy canopy called a tester or cellure. The actual bedstead was its own separate structure, surrounded by all this opulence. Some beds were so high that they even had a trundle bed underneath for a personal valet or maid. Beds and bedding were so valuable that they were passed down through generations. You'd find them mentioned in wills from as early as the 14th century. A well-to-do family might pass on one feather bed and bolster, while the wealthiest folks left behind multiple beds with expensive hangings and top-notch bedding. Even woolen mattresses were considered important enough to be bequeathed to family members. Now, let's talk about the beds in places like monasteries and almshouses. They were pretty simple, with just a mattress, blanket, coverlet, and plain pillow. In 1487, a generous soul even left money to provide sheets for the old folks' beds. They estimated that each bed would cost 13 shillings and sixpence. Peasants also saw some improvements in their sleeping arrangements by the mid-15th century. They were raised off the floor and had a few more comforts, like 3 boards for a bed, a sheet, and pillows. Sure, they might have had some worn coverlets and canvas covers, but it was a step up. By the time Queen Elizabeth I took the throne, not much had changed in the way beds were arranged. Except for the fancy four-posters in wealthy homes and a few inns, things remained pretty familiar. The head sheet disappeared, but people were still all about their cozy bedding. As the middle classes started to thrive, they too wanted feather beds and soft sheets. In fact, around 1580, a clergyman named William Harrison complained about the younger generation's obsession with feathers and pillows. Back in his day, if a man could afford a mattress and a sack of chaff to rest his head on after 7 years of marriage, he considered himself as well off as a lord. Pillows were only for sick women, and servants were lucky if they had a sheet over them to keep the straw from poking their tough hides. By the way, in the Tudor days, which is partly medieval too, people had a similar sleep routine. They would split their sleep into 2 parts, but their sleeping positions were totally wacky compared to what we do today. Sleeping flat on your back was a big no-no because it was associated with passing away, so instead, these folks would snooze in a half-upright position. Oh, how times have changed. Now we can't even imagine sleeping without our comfy beds, fluffy pillows, and soft sheets. But it's always fascinating to look back at how people used to snooze in the good old days.
Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings, much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup. Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
They used to call this island the Paris of the East, mostly because it had beautiful buildings with large gardens and impressive stone archways. But now, it's nothing like it used to be, with all the architecture almost entirely covered in tree roots and vines. Ross Island is a small territory in the Indian Ocean. It's located east of the Indian city of Port Blair. Though initially thought of as a jail, Ross Island eventually became a luxurious resort for the local administrators. They called this island a real treat for its more privileged residents. It boasted opulent bungalows, stained glass window panels brought all the way from Italy, neatly kept gardens, tennis courts, and even swimming pools. Soon after the complex was closed in 1937, a powerful earthquake hit the island. It caused a lot of damage, making it even more uninhabitable. The island is now in the administration of India and has become a tourist attraction for people interested in abandoned towns. Pieces of German architecture still lie hidden in the Namibian desert. The city of Kolmanskop, Namibia, was a luxury location at its peak in the early 1900s when German workers settled here looking for diamonds. This abandoned town used to have everything from a ballroom to a hospital and even a bowling alley. It all started to decline somewhere in the late 1910s when another diamond-packed location was found nearby. So, most of the people living here moved, leaving everything behind in search of more money. Kolmanskop has since been slowly occupied by sand dunes, while the hot temperature and low moisture help to preserve the buildings. This ghost town is also available for visitors. If it sounds interesting, you can book a tour in the nearby town of Lüderitz. Another abandoned castle dominates the view in Krakow, a city in Italy. The whole village sits atop a cliff that's 1,312 feet high. The founders liked this location since they knew it would be easy to defend themselves from unwanted guests. But the castle, built in the 1300s, soon became overwhelmed by landslides and earthquakes. Even though it has no residents anymore, the medieval city often comes alive during the various local festivals that take place here in the summer months. The locals also offer tours and tell amazing stories about the location. One of the highlights of the tour is a statue that seemingly came out of nowhere and now lies in a body of water. Hidden away in the Montana mountains, Garnet Ghost Town tells the well-known American story of the West's gold rush. The town's history goes back to the 1890s, when they found a lot of gold in the Nancy Hanks mine. During its glory days, Garnet had almost 1,000 residents. Even though it's in a relatively secluded location, it had saloons, hotels, stores, a school, and other features of a regular little town. In 1905, when most of the gold had already been taken away, most mines were left behind, so only a couple of hundred residents stayed in Garnet. The final straw came in 1912, when a fire damaged most of the town's buildings. So, by the 1940s, Garnet was completely abandoned. It soon became a hotspot for treasure hunters looking for furnishings and artifacts. That was until a preservation campaign started in the 1970s. It ended with the town being declared a historic district in 2010. To this day, Garnet is one of the best preserved ghost towns in the area. Hashima Island is another abandoned location that tells us that when people leave, nature takes over. This mysterious place was even featured in a James Bond movie because of its ghostly landscape. It used to be a well-known spot in Japan for undersea coal mines, as it was opened in 1881. In 1959, at its peak, there were over 5,000 people living here, including mine workers and their families. As soon as the mines started going dry, sometime in 1970, people started to slowly depart the island, leaving it completely abandoned in 3 months. Even though nobody lives there these days, there are a lot of tourists here that drop off to wander around the abandoned homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. Another town that started with a mining company back in 1881 is Calico, California. People discovered the location was packed with silver, so it soon became home to over 500 silver mines and 3,000 residents. It used to feature hotels, general stores, restaurants, and a school. There was even a local newspaper printed here called the Calico Print. But by 1986, the town had become empty. One of the former locals decided to buy it and began its restoration, making it a registered historical landmark. It even has a museum of the Old West available for tourists. One of the most interesting attractions that were rebuilt is the 1-mile-long Calico and Odessa Railroad. It currently goes through the steep canyons and hills, and even passes the old mines and buildings north of Calico. Approximately 1/3 of the town is original, while the rest consists of newer buildings that are replicas meant to recreate the spirit of its past. If you're a fan of cars, you might have heard of Henry Ford as the famous American industrialist who founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. But in 1927, he began working on another one of his ambitious dreams, Fordlandia. It was supposed to be a massive rubber plantation located near the Tapajos River in Brazil, since he needed a reliable source of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His vision was to design a town complete with swimming pools, a golf course, living bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions for the locals. This project was unfortunate to begin with, since the local rubber trees soon got infected with leaf fungus. Even though Henry Ford invested a staggering $20 million into this potential income source, the town failed to produce the needed rubber. He had nothing left to do but to sell it to Brazil in 1945, and soon it was completely abandoned. Many of its buildings are still standing, but have been taken over by the surrounding nature. You can still see curious tourists wandering through it to this day. During its glory days, Hampi was the second largest city in the world. Looking at its ruins today, it's hard to imagine this Indian city used to be filled with temples and bazaars, and that it served as an important center of the Mauryan Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was destroyed in the 16th century, but it still has beautifully preserved forts and markets. It became part of the UNESCO World Heritage in 1986, aiming to protect its buildings, such as the Lotus Mahal, a stone structure that was carved to resemble a lotus flower opening to the sun. A tourist village was constructed back in 1920 along the shore of Epicuén, a salt lake about 370 miles southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was designed to provide people with a busy city life a breath of fresh air near the restorative salt waters of the nearby lake. It was soon equipped with a railroad station and ended up having a population of more than 5,000 residents. The project was also destined to fail soon enough, as the unusual amount of rain at that time caused Lake Epicuén to swell. In 1985, the water took over the local dam, and the town was flooded. The waters were so deep that they even reached a depth of 33 feet in 1993. They only began to recede in 2009 and left behind the remaining buildings, literally encrusted in salt. No one came back to the town except for Pablo Novak, who returned here back in 2012 and was the only resident of Villa Epicuan at the time.